Merry Christmas, everybody, and a Happy New Year too. May your holidays be merry and every wish come true. May you always be remembered by those so dear to you. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year all year through. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year all year through. Well, there's old Grandpappy, and he sure looks happy with...
Hello, welcome to the holiday edition of Kevin Boy Knits Woolcast. It is episode 4, and today I'm going to talk about my balls, my knitted balls, and we're also going to look at dyeing yarn naturally through the winter. There's so many different things that you can do during the winter, so there's no excuse not to dye yarn throughout the winter months. So let's get into it. The knitted balls. I love knitting knitted balls. You know, it usually takes probably around, I can usually crank one out in about the length of a hockey game. I guess it depends on how exciting the hockey game is, but usually the length of the hockey game. But how I got into it was I took a class years ago in New York at Vogue Knitting Live, and it was by Arne and Carlos. And you probably know who they are. They are two great knitters from Norway, and they were actually designers before they focused entirely on knitting. But I took their class. It was a great class. It was a lot of fun. They joke around a lot, which I think you need to do when you're learning how to knit a ball, because once you grasp it, it is easy to do. But really, the cast on and the first 2 rows are probably the most difficult. I've taught a number of ball classes, and that's usually what I find. The class usually has a difficult time grasping the cast on. You cast on DPNs, double pointed needles, and it usually, once you get past the first 2 rows, you're clear sailing. Anyway, I took the class and had a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, learned a lot about the guys, and then I went and bought the Christmas book, 55 Christmas Balls to Knit. And there's so many great things about this book. One of them is that everything is driven off of one template. So that's the template that they have. Hopefully that you can see that online. But they've got 55 designs, and they use the same template. And the book, it has fantastic pictures in it. It is also, the description and the patterns are very clear. They explain how they got to where they are with respect to the patterns. I won't give it away. And then they talk about the influence that they had over the balls. But you can see, like, fantastic picture, very easy to read pattern, and it gives you the tools for you to go away and make your own patterns. And so I've tweaked their template a little bit because I just like the shape of that comes out of the tweaking that I did on the template. But you can do all kinds of different things with the template. Like, you can, if you stretch this portion out and shorten this portion, you'll have a different shaped ball. And the wonderful thing about knitting balls is that it depends on the yarn that you use, and also like the size of the yarn and the size of the needles, and that will have an impact on the size of the balls. So those are 2. This one, I got this pattern off the internet, and it's great. We're really happy with that one. This one I designed a couple of years ago, and this is the design I use in my classes. I use a little shiny yarn just to pick up the reflection of the light. That's another one. Here's another one I designed for Christmas. It's a mistletoe one. You can hang it over the door, or you can hang it on the tree. I also designed one for Bear Week, and so that's the color of the bears and the bear print. Did one for Leather Week. So there's all kinds of things you can do with balls. Also, when I went to Denmark a number of years ago, I really was interested in a couple of things. One, finding out what the knitting scene is in Denmark, because I've heard a lot about it, what type of yarn they have, and then also to find out if guys are knitting and how many guys are knitting. And I've been back and forth a number of times. I've given lectures on knitting. I've also taught classes over there as well. But what I did was I knit a ball with the flag on it. And I took this to various tourist attractions, and also when I was sitting in a restaurant by myself, I would put it on the table and people would come by and say, "What is that? Where did you get it? How do I get one?" And I use this as a tool to help open the door for a conversation around men who knit. So the conversation went like this, where did you get it? And I told them I knit it, and then told them why I was there. And usually they would start laughing because they said, only old ladies knit. And it's true, a lot of older women knit. However, I told them there's a lot of other people that knit as well. And once we got into the conversation about men's knitting, they would eventually disclose, they being guys, would eventually disclose that they actually knew how to knit. Either their mother or their grandmother taught them how to knit. They knit in school. So it was interesting for me to just try to understand, why they weren't willing to talk about guys knitting, but it was just something that they didn't do. So I went down to a couple of the yarn stores and chatted with the owners and asked them how many guys they have come in. And they basically said guys don't usually come in to buy yarn. Not many do anyway. And it's usually women who buy yarn for men. So I found that very interesting because yarn is available everywhere in Denmark. It's available at the grocery store. It's available everywhere. So anyway, I was surprised, but it was also very interesting, and it was all because of this ball that I opened up and had so many conversations with so many amazing people in Denmark. So I would highly recommend the Christmas Ball book, 55 Christmas Balls to Knit. Fantastic book, and you can, if you pick up one now, if you're lucky enough to have a brick and mortar bookstore in your town, they might have it there. It's in all of the large bookstores, or go online and buy it. But highly, highly recommend it. Also, this book was published, I think, in 2010, and then it was translated in English in 2011. That's why they look younger. And they've had a number of books out after that. I have about 4 of their books, and it's all the same. They probably use the same photographer, but the photos are fantastic. The patterns are great. It's a really well laid out book. So I'm very, very happy with this book, and I refer to it a lot. So very, very happy and highly recommend it. So those are my balls. I also wanted to talk to you about dyeing yarn throughout the winter, because a lot of people think that when they dye yarn, they think of the springtime and the summertime, and there are so many great flowers to use and during that period of time, but there's also a lot you can do in the winter time. And so I do a number of things that I wanted to share with you in the winter. Every season brings unique things that you can use in your dye pot. I'm going to talk about some of the items that you can get outside of your house, and also some of the stuff that you use that are in your kitchen. But there's no excuse not to dye yarn in the wintertime. This is one of my favorites, birch bark. Birch bark is multi-purpose. You can use it for a lot of things, even outside of dyeing. First Nations people in Canada used to build canoes out of birch bark, and they also used to remove cataracts from your eyes as well. I wouldn't encourage that today. But I love birch bark because when I find it in the forest, and I go out into the forest pretty much every weekend at least, to look for new things that have popped up in the forest or trees that have fallen. If there's birch bark there that has recently fallen, if you extract the birch bark from it, you might be able to pull some pinks from the bark. So that's exciting. But also, just if it's been there for a while, it brings different colors. So I love birch bark. It's a nice warm color when it's applied to yarn, and it reacts differently with mordant as well. But I will mention that you never ever pull the bark off of a birch tree, a living birch tree. It will definitely damage the tree. So always look for birch bark on fallen trees. We also have juniper for those who are patient. You can actually use the needles, burn the needles, and take the ash and use the ash as an afterbath on your yarn, and that will have an impact on the color. You can also just use it in a dye as well. And blue spruce, I love using blue spruce. If you use blue spruce with some iron, it will bring out a beautiful steel blue color. So blue spruce is fantastic. You can also use pine cones, you can use acorns. With the acorns, you use the shell of the acorn, you grind it up, and that works nicely with yarn. And there's also a bunch of mordants that you can find as well. And mordants are the actual, the step that you use when you're dyeing natural yarn. You've got your dye bath and you've got your yarn, and you need something to use to bind the color to the yarn. And so that's what we call a mordant. And so you can find mordant in nature. You can, if you walk out to a sumac tree and use the leaves of the sumac tree, that will act as a mordant. Black walnuts definitely have, you don't need to use any mordant with them because of the color. So you can use also gulls that are on oak trees as a mordant. So there's a lot of things out there, acorn shells as well. So there are so many things to use out in the forest for natural dyeing. But if you come inside and look at, what could you possibly use? Citrus is fantastic. You've got, you can use grapefruit skins or lemon skins or lime skins for dyeing. And it's fun because you usually have a lot of them around during the holiday season. And then pomegranates. Pomegranates remind me of the holidays. They usually come out on holiday season. And when you think about dyeing with a pomegranate, you usually think about the beautiful red color, the ruby red color that's inside on the seeds. But that's not what you use when you're dyeing with pomegranates. You actually use the skin of the pomegranate. So make sure that you save your pomegranate skins. Another thing that you should use is avocados. Lots of people have avocados. Your friends probably use avocados. So save the pits, because the pits also you can use as a mordant in your dyeing. And I used some avocado pits in my dyeing last weekend, and I'll show you the results. So those are the things that you can use that are readily available. But you could also make concentrates either through the summer and the spring. And so I've got a bunch of concentrates downstairs in my cold room. This is mint that I used. I've got a bunch of mint downstairs, so I will use that throughout the winter. I also have birch, and I took my birch. I wonder if the light will shine through this, but it's a nice brown color. So what I did was I filled up a bunch of mason jars with my birch dye bath, and I put a black walnut in it, and that definitely will have an impact on the color. It will enhance the color. It will make it a darker brown color. But I've already dyed a few skeins with it, and I really like the color. So that's something that you can do. Try it out over the winter time. But again, there's no excuse why you can't dye yarn during the winter. So take a look at this beautiful pot. This is a copper pot that was made in 1820, around the 1820s, and it was made in England, and then it was brought over to Canada, and it's a copper double boiler, and I absolutely love it. It is fantastic. I've used it a couple of times. I used it last weekend. It's really heavy as well. But I used it to dye some yarn, and so what I did was I used my onions, my yellow onions, just the skins of them, filled up the pot, and then covered all of the onions and probably an extra third of the pot with water. Boiled that I brought it up to a boil and then let it simmer for around 3 to 4 hours, and got a fantastic color from it. It was a beautiful yellowish brown color. And so here is the result. These are 2 skeins of Canadian sourced fiber. It is Rambouillet and Finn, and it's really nice, soft and squishy. Look at the color. So this one is darker than this one. On this one, I used the same dye bath in both of them to begin with. So that was the starting point. And then I added alum to this dye bath and dyed the yarn with alum. And so you can see the lighter colors. So I've got yellows, a little bit of brown, and it's really nice. And then this one is darker. This one I used a little bit of iron dye bath in it. And so that brought out a rich, darker color. But they both look great. I'm very, very happy with that. And then this beautiful skein of yarn is so soft. It is cashmere and rambouillet mix, and it's really, really nice. I love the browns that came out. Really shows well on the skein of yarn. So very, very impressed with that. And I will have a couple of these skeins up for sale in January. Anyway, just wanted to share that with you. I also wanted to give a shout out to one of my fiber heroes, Joe Wilcox. Joe is a phenomenal knitter, designer, crocheter. He's had a very popular knitting blog for a number of years and consistently ranked in the top 10 on the internet. But he's one of the founding fathers of the men's knitting retreat, and that's where I met him around 8 years ago. I had no idea what to expect and had no idea that it would provide me with so much inspiration and take me down the road that I'm on today. So I just wanted to shout out to you, Joe. Thank you for everything. I will put a link to your blog, so hopefully people will check that out. I imagine that most of them already have, and I wish everyone happy holidays. Take care. Bye-bye.
Écoutez les clochettes du joyeux temps des fêtes, annonçant la joie de chaque cœur qui bat au royaume du bonhomme hiver. Sous la neige qui tombe, le traîneau vagabonde, semant tout autour des chansons d'amour au royaume du bonhomme hiver. Le voilà qui sourit sur la place, son chapeau, sa canne et son fou.